I never quite fit in with Jason's friends. From the beginning, I could feel it. The awkward glances, the half-laughs when I spoke, the jokes that weren't really jokes. "She's a little too serious, huh? Man, you've changed since you got married." They said it with grins, like it was harmless, but it never felt that way. I'd sit there at the edge of the circle, smiling politely while they reminisced about wild nights and inside jokes I wasn't part of. I wasn't just the outsider. I was the reason their friend wasn't fun anymore. When I'd bring it up to Jason, he always waved it off. "They're just messing around, babe. Don't take it personally." And for a while, I didn't. I tried to laugh along, tried to not flinch when they rolled their eyes behind my back. But it wore on me. That feeling of not being welcome in the world that revolved around my own husband, it made me shrink a little each time we were with them. Still, I stayed quiet. I wanted to be the supportive wife, the easygoing one. I thought love meant letting some things go. So when Jason asked if he could go out with the guys for a bachelor celebration, just one night, I hesitated. I didn't like how vague it all sounded, and I didn't trust his friends to keep the night harmless. But Jason smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "One night with the boys. I'll be back before midnight." I gave him a nod and watched him leave, trying to silence the knot forming in my stomach. As the door closed behind him, I stood there in the hallway, arms crossed, listening to the silence settle over the house. It wasn't the first time Jason had gone out without me, but tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way he said celebration, like it was more about him than his friend. Or maybe it was just me, tired of always pretending I didn't mind being left out. I wandered into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of wine, and tried to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I looked at the clock, 8:17 p.m., still early. I scrolled through my phone absent-mindedly, checking messages, reading the news, doing anything to distract myself. But every few minutes I'd glance at the front door, half expecting it to swing open with Jason laughing, saying he forgot something. Instead, it stayed shut. I told myself not to be paranoid. He said he'd be back by midnight. I told myself to relax, to stop being the wife who waits up with worry. But my gut wasn't listening. To calm my nerves, I decided to tidy up the living room. As I moved his jacket from the couch, something fell out and hit the floor with a soft thud. I bent down, and there it was, Jason's wallet. I picked it up, thinking maybe I should call him, let him know he left it behind. But something made me pause. I turned it over in my hands, thumbed it open, looking for a note, a receipt, maybe even an address for wherever they were headed. That's when I saw it, a folded piece of paper tucked inside. It wasn't just any piece of paper. The edges were crisp, like it had been printed recently, and folded with intention. I opened it slowly, not knowing what I was expecting. Maybe a joke, maybe directions, maybe nothing. But as my eyes scanned the words, my heart stopped. At the top, in bold gold lettering, it read, "Jason's last night of freedom." And just beneath it, in smaller text, "Divorce party celebration. Let's welcome his new chapter without Brenda." My name, right there, like a curse word they couldn't wait to erase. My hands shook. The wine glass I'd been holding slipped from my grip and shattered on the floor, but I barely noticed. I stood there, paper in hand, staring at a truth I hadn't even imagined. This wasn't a bachelor party. This wasn't a night out with the guys. It was a celebration of my absence, a farewell party I wasn't invited to, because I was the one being left behind. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I felt the floor tilt beneath me, like the universe had snapped, quietly and cruelly. But in the midst of that silence, something inside me shifted. Not a scream, not a sob. Just resolve. A cold, clear voice in my head whispering, "No, not like this." I walked over to the sink, washed the wine from my hands, and looked at myself in the mirror above the stove. The reflection staring back at me wasn't scared. She was done pretending, and she knew exactly where she needed to go. The car keys felt heavy in my hand, or maybe it was the weight of what I'd just read. I slipped the invitation into my purse, careful not to crumple it. Every word still burned in my mind. Without Brenda. They didn't even try to hide it. This wasn't a secret accidentally revealed. It was a secret they assumed I'd never find. And that made it worse. Because if you're going to end something, the least you can do is look someone in the eye when you do it. Jason didn't even offer me that. I walked through the house slowly, the way you move through a space when you know something inside it just died. Our photos were still on the walls, beach trips, birthdays, that cheesy honeymoon selfie we took in Venice. I stopped at one frame and stared at it. I looked happy there. Young. In love. Maybe a little naive. I wanted to tell her what I knew now. That trust isn't always returned. That love can be performed. That smiles can hide betrayals just waiting for the right moment to surface. I should have cried. I think most people would, but the tears didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange calmness settle into my bones, the kind that shows up when a person reaches their breaking point and decides not to shatter. I changed clothes, put on something black, something sleek, no mascara, no perfume, just enough to look composed. My mother always said dignity is a woman's best armor, and tonight I needed armor more than I needed comfort. The night air was thick with summer heat, the kind that clings to your skin and won't let go. As I stepped outside and locked the front door, I felt like I was sealing off more than just the house. I was locking away a version of myself that believed in Jason. The drive to the bar was quiet, but my thoughts were anything but. I kept replaying moments in my mind. The nights he came home late and blamed work, the weekends with his friends where I was too tired to tag along. Maybe I wasn't tired. Maybe I already knew. I parked 2 blocks away. I didn't want to pull up to that place like a woman begging for answers. I wanted to walk in steady, unreadable. I sat in the car for a minute before grabbing my purse, checking to make sure the invitation was still inside. It was. Its corners were starting to bend slightly from my grip. I couldn't stop squeezing it. Maybe because deep down, some part of me still didn't believe it was real, that this was all some tasteless prank or misunderstanding. But it wasn't. It was printed, planned, celebrated. As I walked toward the bar, I noticed how alive the city felt. Laughter spilled from open patios, music thumped from passing cars, couples strolled hand in hand. It felt surreal. My world had just split in two, and yet everything else around me was perfectly intact. That's the cruel part of heartbreak. The world doesn't pause to acknowledge it. You just keep walking, even when your chest feels like it's caving in. And with every step toward that bar, I knew I wasn't going there for closure. I was going to witness the truth with my own eyes. I reached the entrance and paused. The door was wide open, the bass from inside pulsing through the pavement like a second heartbeat. I could already hear the laughter, the kind of rowdy, unfiltered laughter that comes from too many drinks and not enough conscience. I took a breath, stood a little taller, and stepped inside. The place was dim but loud, full of bodies moving, clinking glasses, shouting over music that seemed determined to drown out guilt. I scanned the room, pretending I didn't feel my own pulse hammering in my throat. I walked past a couple making out by the jukebox, past a group of guys howling at something on someone's phone, past a girl taking a selfie in the bathroom mirror. And then I saw him, Jason. Sitting at the bar like a man without a care in the world, a drink in one hand, his other arm lazily draped around the shoulders of a woman in a red dress I'd never seen before. She laughed at something he said and leaned in. They looked close. Familiar. Too familiar. And above them, taped to the wall, a banner. Freedom looks good on you, Jason. That was the moment the noise around me disappeared, like a movie scene with the sound stripped out. My heels clicked against the floor as I approached. Heads began to turn. Conversation slowed. The woman in red raised an eyebrow. Jason turned, mid-laugh, his smile faltering the second he saw me. I stood there, right in front of him, calm and composed. Surprise, I said, my voice steady. Thought I'd toast to the end, too. You could hear a pin drop. That's how fast the energy shifted when I spoke. One moment they were cheering, pouring shots, dancing like fools. The next, frozen. Jason stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. Maybe in a way, he had. Because the woman standing in front of him wasn't the wife he'd lied to. She wasn't the one who stayed quiet at dinners, who laughed off the digs from his friends, who let things slide for the sake of peace. No. That version of me had died in our kitchen hours ago. He stammered my name, like he wasn't sure if he should say it out loud. The girl beside him shifted uncomfortably, trying to read the situation like it was some kind of awkward scene she could sneak out of. I didn't give either of them that luxury. I reached into my purse and pulled out the invitation. Held it up, just high enough for everyone nearby to see. Funny thing, I said. You leave your wallet on the table, you never know what your wife might find. I placed it gently on the bar beside his drink. His hand didn't move. Eyes were everywhere, watching, judging. Some looked away in embarrassment, not for me, but for themselves. They were part of this. They came to toast to a man walking out of his marriage without dignity, without courage. And now they were caught. I wasn't the one being humiliated anymore. That shame belonged to them. And as I stood there, back straight, voice calm, I realized something. This wasn't my moment of collapse. It was my rise. Jason finally found his voice, but it came out thin, like he was trying to sound casual and failing miserably. Brenda, it's not what you think, he said. I tilted my head slightly, the way you do when someone insults your intelligence without even meaning to. Really? I said, nodding toward the banner above him. Because it looks pretty self-explanatory from where I'm standing. He glanced up at it like he was seeing it for the first time, suddenly aware of just how ridiculous, how exposed he really was. His friends didn't make a sound. I could see the tension in his jaw, the shame creeping up his neck in blotchy red patches. The woman next to him took her hand off his shoulder and inched away like maybe the fallout wouldn't touch her if she moved fast enough. She didn't know me, but even she could feel it. This wasn't going to be just a quiet scene. This was a reckoning, and I was no longer the woman who politely kept her voice down. I had been quiet long enough. Tonight, every silence I ever swallowed was going to speak for me. A bartender, not knowing what else to do, tried to hand me a drink. I took it. Why not? If they were going to throw a party, I might as well raise a glass. I stepped back slightly, eyes scanning the room. I could feel the weight of every stare. Some pitied me. Some respected me. And a few actually looked ashamed. Good. Let them squirm. Let them remember this night, not as the celebration they planned, but the one I took back in front of all of them. I raised the glass slowly, not in a toast to Jason. No, this was for me. For every night I waited up, for every moment I made excuses for him, for every time I bit my tongue to keep peace in a marriage he was already halfway out of. I took a sip and walked further into the bar, each step deliberate, like I was reclaiming ground I hadn't realized I'd lost. No shouting, no drama, just truth, carried in silence louder than anything else in the room. I made my way to the center, where the lights were brightest and no one could pretend not to see. The chatter had vanished. Even the music seemed to fade beneath the weight of what was happening. Jason stood there, not moving, not speaking, as if any word might make it worse. And he was right. I wasn't there to plead, to cry, or to ask why. I had seen enough. The truth had walked right up to me and introduced itself. So now, I was simply returning the favor. I looked around once more, at the friends who never liked me, now suddenly unsure of what to do with their hands, their guilt, their cowardice. And then I smiled. Not bitter, not broken, but with the kind of clarity that only comes when everything false finally falls away. Let's toast, I said. Two endings. And with that, I stepped onto the small platform near the stage and prepared to say what none of them were ready to hear. I didn't rush. I climbed the steps like I belonged there, because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I did. The platform wasn't big, but it was enough, just high enough to be seen, just bold enough to make sure no one could look away. I stood at the center and raised the glass in my hand. No microphone, no speech notes, no theatrics. Just a woman standing in front of the wreckage of a lie and choosing to be heard. I looked at Jason. He still hadn't moved. Good. To my husband, I began, and the room held its breath. Who didn't have the courage to ask for a divorce, but had the audacity to throw a party for one. A few people actually gasped. Others tried to look at their shoes, suddenly fascinated by the floor. Jason's face turned pale, his mouth open but empty. To the man who thought betrayal would taste better with whiskey and neon lights. And to his friends, I continued, sweeping my gaze across the crowd, who never liked me, thank you, because tonight, I finally see you clearly. Every word came out steady, not because I wasn't angry, but because I was done begging to be understood. I wasn't just talking to Jason anymore. I was talking to every woman in the room who had ever swallowed her pain to keep a man comfortable. I was talking to myself, the me that stayed too long, hoped too hard, forgave too much. And as I spoke, I could feel something loosening inside me. Not bitterness, not rage, just release. Like I was cutting the last thread holding me to a version of myself I no longer needed. I reached into my purse and pulled out a crisp envelope, one I had prepared months ago, quietly, with no intention of ever using. But some part of me must have known. I unfolded the paper slowly, letting the silence grow thick around me. Then I walked over and placed them, without a word, right in front of Jason. Divorce papers, signed, finalized, ready. I figured since you already planned the party, I said softly, you might as well get the paperwork to match. He didn't touch them. He just stared, stunned, like I had rewritten the ending of a story he thought he was controlling. Around us, the room stayed frozen, a strange mix of secondhand shame and fascination. I could almost hear the shifting in people's minds, the realization that this wasn't a meltdown. This was a declaration. This was power reclaimed. I didn't need to yell. The calm in my voice carried more weight than any outburst ever could. And Jason? He had no script for this part, no comeback, just silence. Then I turned to the woman still lingering near him, the one in the red dress who had laughed too easily, touched too freely. You can keep him, I said, looking her right in the eyes. Just remember, he celebrates endings more than beginnings. She blinked, as if I'd just handed her something fragile and dangerous all at once. Maybe I had. That was up to her. As for me, I was done. Done explaining. Done apologizing. Done shrinking. My voice had finally filled the room, and I wasn't giving it back. I stepped down from the platform slowly, my heels clicking like punctuation marks on a story that was no longer his to tell. No one dared stop me. They just parted, quietly, like water making way for something heavier than itself. I walked past the bar where I used to sit beside him, past the table where his friends had laughed without me, past the girl in red who now looked less like a conquest and more like a warning. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I had said everything that needed saying. At the door, I paused, not out of hesitation, but to remember the moment, to mark it in my memory like a scar that no longer hurts. I had entered that bar a wife they thought could be discarded, dismissed, pitied, and I was leaving as something else entirely, not a woman scorned, but a woman freed. There's a difference. One is still tied to the pain. The other walks away from it, heels high, eyes forward, heart intact. The summer air hit my skin like applause, warm, real, and mine. I didn't check my phone. I didn't look back at the glow of the bar behind me. I just walked, steady and sure, into the night. And somewhere deep inside, I knew. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the end of theirs. The days that followed were quiet in all the right ways. No more fake laughs echoing from the living room. No more wondering who he was texting when he thought I wasn't watching. No more waking up next to someone who had already left me in every way that mattered. At first, it felt strange, like standing in a house after a storm, everything still in place, but something in the air forever changed. But then came the peace. Real peace. The kind that doesn't ask for explanations or second chances, just room to breathe. Word of that night spread quickly. A friend of a friend had been at the bar and posted something vague but sharp on social media. And just like that, the story began to ripple. Messages started arriving. Women I hadn't spoken to in years, acquaintances I barely knew, all saying the same thing. You were brave. You inspired me. You did what I was too afraid to do. It was strange, being seen for the first time because I had finally stopped hiding. But it was also healing. Every message was a thread, stitching something back together inside me. A week later, I posted a photo. Just me, alone, standing at the edge of a cliffside beach in Portugal, wind in my hair, the sea crashing behind me. The caption read, "Turns out I was the one needing freedom after all." And to my surprise, it went viral. Thousands of comments, women cheering, men squirming, strangers writing long, heartfelt paragraphs about their own breakups, their own awakenings. I didn't expect any of it. I didn't need the validation, but I welcomed it. Because sometimes the only thing stronger than pain is sharing it. Jason tried calling. Of course he did. At first it was just a missed call or two. Then came the texts. Long ones, short ones, photos from better times, even an audio message where he sounded like he'd been crying. I didn't respond to any of them. Not because I was angry, not even because I wanted to hurt him, but because I had nothing left to say. He had spoken clearly the night he toasted to his freedom. He just didn't expect me to hear it, or to answer back in my own language of silence. Eventually, I blocked him. There was no dramatic send-off, no final speech, no "I deserve closure" conversation. I'd already had my closure, and I delivered it at a bar filled with the people who thought I was too quiet to ever stand up for myself. The woman in red? She faded quickly from the picture. Probably realized Jason's charm came with a price, that he wasn't freedom, he was just escape. And eventually, even she didn't want to pay for that kind of disappointment. He was alone now, exactly how he started. Meanwhile, I was discovering something wild and unfamiliar. Joy. Real joy. Not the polite kind you wear at dinner parties or post in holiday photos. But the kind that bubbles up unexpectedly, like laughing at nothing while sipping wine at sunset, or waking up without dread in your chest. I was meeting new people. People who didn't know me as Jason's wife. People who listened, who asked real questions, who told the truth, even when it was messy. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something that was mine. Months later, I found myself at a rooftop bar in Lisbon, not the kind of place I ever pictured myself in before. It was one of those golden evenings where the city feels soft and alive, like it's breathing with you. I was surrounded by laughter, but this time, it wasn't forced. It wasn't performative. It was mine. Real friends, real stories, real connection. Someone made a toast, and we all raised our glasses. I didn't even realize I was smiling until someone snapped a photo. And I saw it. That smile wasn't surviving. It was thriving. There was no grand announcement. No perfect bow to tie it all together. Just a moment, and then another, and another. That's how healing works. Quietly, stubbornly, beautifully. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need him to suffer. I just needed distance, clarity, and space to remember who I was before I tried so hard to be what he wanted. And the more space I gave myself, the more I realized I liked the woman I was becoming. She was stronger. She was softer. She was real. As the sun dipped below the skyline, I leaned back in my chair, let the wind play with my hair, and took a long sip of wine. Someone beside me laughed so hard they snorted, and we all burst out again. I looked out at the view, the whole city glowing, and I thought, the best party I ever attended was the one where I walked away,